Wait.
Why are you still here? You need to hurry.
How do I know you won't betray us?
I have no reason to betray you. Look, your friend is already gone. If you're still here when the soldiers get back, I won't need to betray you.
But you would betray your city. If you're found out, they will kill you.
And if I'm not, I'll die when your people take the city, unless they honor your bargain, which is why I need you to go now.
But what about your gods? You would betray them.
What have the gods of Jericho ever done for me? They're powerless to protect this city. Your God is not like them. He does things. He leads you.
So, you would serve Yahweh now?
If he will protect me and my family, and if you will honor your bargain. It is I who needs to be questioning you. How do I know you'll keep your promise? How do I know you'll spare us?
Because I have sworn by the name of Yahweh. You're a brave woman. Here. Hang this from your window, and it will be of my sign, a promise to you, and none of my people will hurt you.
All right. Then I will trust you too. But now you need to go.
I love that vignette, especially the ending. The story of Rahab and Solomon is a great love story, but it's also a story about trust, as was just portrayed here. Trust. There seems to be, as I look at the story, a connection between people trusting each other and people learning to trust God. I invite you to turn to the book of Joshua. If you have a Bible close by or a Bible app, please turn to the book of Joshua. We'll focus on chapter 2, but we'll look at a few different sections there. The lead up to this event, that conversation between the spy of Israel, Solomon, and the prostitute, Rahab of Jericho, was a story of the Israelites learning trust, or much of the time not learning trust, and that was really the problem. As Joshua finds himself there on the shores of the Jordan once again with a deja vu experience of planning the invasion, he must have remembered very clearly that he had been there 40 years prior to this. Moses had sent out 12 spies in a relatively short time after the exodus from Egypt. Moses had sent out 12 spies to check out the land of promise that God said he would give to the people. And you might remember that story. All 12 spies came back and they agreed that the land was amazing. It was an incredible promised land, truly flowing with milk and honey as God had promised. But 10 of those spies were very fixated on the giants in the land and the defenses of the people. And they said, whoa, I know God said we can take this land, but whoa, it doesn't look that way. And then there was Joshua and there was Caleb, and they both said, it's a good land. God has promised it. Surely he can give us this land. Well, it was the other 10 who won the day, and as a result, they spent 40 years wandering through this wilderness. Not a great home. Certainly not what God had planned for them, and it was all their fault. And so Joshua finds himself there again, and the first chapter of Joshua, of the book of Joshua, records him giving a speech to the people. And twice he says in that speech, okay, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. In other words, I interpret that to mean, be strong means know who you are. Be strong in the faith of God. Know who you are. And be courageous enough to follow through on that. So twice he says that, and at the end of the chapter, the people respond to him, we'll follow you and obey you, just like we did Moses. And Joshua had to be saying, can you do better? And then they repeat to him, Joshua, you be strong and courageous. It's a great pep talk all around. And so Joshua knows better. Last time it was 12 spies and 2 got it right. So this time he just sends the 2, okay? And they find themselves in the land, checking it out. And Joshua chapter 2 picks up the story. It says, "Then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Grove. He instructed them, 'Scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho.' So the 2 men set out and came to the house of the prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night." And yes, parents, I did that to you again. I used that word, prostitute, again. If you didn't explain it to your kids last week, you got another chance. All right. You're welcome. This lady, Rahab, has some baggage. The spies are about to encounter her and work out a deal with her, and things work out really well for the spies, for Israel, and for Rahab and her family in the end. But as they approach this woman, you have to understand, this woman has grown up on the side of the tracks. It tells us that she lives in the city wall. The city of Jericho, relatively, by our standards today, a relatively small city-state, okay? But it has very thick walls. It's on a prominent hillside, or actually hilltop, and it's got these very thick stone walls, probably 30 feet thick or more, of just stones stacked and mortared, and it's pretty impregnable. But in the wall, there were also some dwellings, and it tells us that Rahab lives in one of these dwellings, and the word used to describe her occupation tells us she is a particular kind of person, a particular kind of prostitute. She's a shrine prostitute. She's involved in religious rituals. She also apparently runs a hotel there, and so the spies from Israel find themselves at her hotel. And we don't need to speculate about what type of hotel it is too much. It's probably something equivalent to what you see in the old Western movies. Okay. The word is brothel. All right. But that's enough of that. Let's just move on from there. And so the spies find themselves there. And it says there at the end of verse 1 again, "So the 2 men set out and came to the house of the prostitute Rahab." The house was where? In the wall. Yeah. All right. And stayed there that night. But someone told the king of Jericho, "Some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, "Bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come here to spy out the whole land." Rahab had hidden the 2 men. But she replied, "Yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they were from. They left the town at dusk, as the gates were about to close. I don't know where they went. If you hurry, you can probably catch up with them." Pretty slick lady. "Don't look around here. Don't waste time. They left. If you hurry away from here, you can probably catch them." Actually, she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them beneath bundles of flax that she had laid out. So the king's men went looking for the spies along the road leading to the shallow crossings of the Jordan River, and as soon as the king's men had left, the gate of Jericho was shut. Before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up to the roof to talk with them. This conversation is fascinating to me. On first blush, it seems like a statement of faith, and I think it is. But based on what she says, we don't know for sure yet. She's heard here expressing some things that the other kings of the other nations are recorded as expressing in chapter 6. A simple recognition that the God of Israel seems to be powerful. But I want to ask you, is that enough to be called faith? No, it's not. And yet it's extraordinary what she says. Verse 9, she says, "I know the Lord, And this is the personal name of the Lord. You can tell that in your translation by the fact that it's all capital letters. Most translations have that. It's the name Yahweh, sometimes expressed Jehovah. I know the Lord has given you the land, she told them. We are all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. For we have heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og, a couple of kings, the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan, whose people were completely destroyed. Those kings had attacked Israel, and God gave Israel strength to defeat them. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. It seems like Rahab is perceptive. Her nation, this relatively small nation of Jericho, surrounded by this strong wall, served a number of gods. The supreme god was the god Baal. And Baal, that name essentially means master or lord. He's the chief among them. And he's seen as having domain over the heavens. So for her to say, your God is the God of the heavens above and the earth below, is a recognition that her God has come up short. And her God is the God that she has served as in her profession, right? She is a shrine prostitute. And yet she recognizes that this God of Israel is something greater. She says, now swear to me by the Lord that you will be kind to me and my family since I have helped you. She took a risk in helping these guys. She didn't know if there would be any benefit for her. She probably hoped for it, or certainly hoped for it. She expresses that now. Be kind to me since I have helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live along with my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all their families. She has taken a risk and chosen to trust these men. We offer our own lives as a guarantee for your safety. They invite that trust. The men agreed. If you don't betray us, we will keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land. Then, since Rahab's house was built into the town wall, she let them down by a rope through the window. Escape to the hill country, she told them. Hide there for 3 days from the men searching for you. Then, when they have returned, you can go on your way. She gives them an out. This is good. She's very, very helpful to these men. Before they left, the men told her, we will be bound by an oath that we have taken only if you follow these instructions. Now, this is where the story gets serious. These men have taken a chance and they've trusted this woman. But now they call her to she took a chance too, but now they call her to take a bigger chance. You see, it's possible that these men could have taken refuge with this woman on the wall, and for all they know, that they crawl into the hay or whatever it is on the roof, and she goes out and tells the soldiers, and they're done. But they've chosen to trust her instead of taking off around the city somewhere else. They must have thought there was some reason to trust this lady. But now they push her to trust them. Follow these instructions. Verse 18. When we come into the land, you must leave this scarlet rope hanging from the window through which you let us down. Now just think about that for a minute. The king's national security forces have just been looking for these spies. They've gone to Rahab's house because that's where they were last seen. They've questioned her. She said, no, they're not here. Take off as quick as you can. Go out of the city because you might be able to catch them still. And now these spies say, okay, you're just about to let us down by this rope from your window outside of the wall, and we want you to leave the rope hanging there when we're gone. What are the national security forces going to think when they see a rope hanging out of the window of the place where the spies were last seen? You see it? They're testing her faith. They're saying, now trust us and trust our God. wave the American flag from your window because we're about to invade. And all your family members, your father, mother, brothers, and all your relatives must be here inside the house. If they go out into the streets and are killed, it will not be our fault. But if anyone lays a hand on people inside the house, we will accept the responsibility for their death. If you betray us, however, we are not bound by this oath in any way. And she says, I accept your terms. This is the point of no return. She has crossed over. And she sent them on their way, leaving the scarlet rope hanging from the window. The spies went up into the hill country and stayed there 3 days, and the men were chasing them, searched everywhere along the road, but they finally returned without success. Then the 2 spies came down from the hill country and crossed the Jordan and reported to Joshua all that had happened. And the Lord has given us the whole land, they said, for all the people in the land are terrified of us. I want us to step back from this story and try, if we can, to trace the progression of Rahab's journey from shrine prostitute in her own religion and a national, she's a Jerichoite. I don't know how you say that. Jerichite? Anyway. She's a citizen of Jericho, to what she's going to become, a citizen of Israel. And instead of a servant of Baal and the other gods of Jericho, she's going to become a servant of Israel's God. But what was the path that got her from there to there? And the reason I want us to contemplate this question is because she was very much a throwaway person. She was implicated in prostitution, not good. She was implicated in the worship of this other god, this false god, that whose worship system abused people horribly. She was now a traitor to her nation. And even though we might admire her a little bit or find her useful, generally a traitor, somebody guilty of treason, is not an admirable character. She was a throwaway person. On top of that, Moses had said, when you go into this land, you make sure to kill everybody. She was already fit to die. So how do we get her from that, being a throwaway person, to a full citizen of the nation of Israel and a servant of God? I think it's a worthy question. Because all of us know somebody who we might tend to view in that light. And I want to make this real by challenging you to bring one person's face to your mind. And if they happen to be sitting here, don't look at them right now. That becomes awkward. But on a serious note, there's somebody that you've found so incredibly frustrating for way too long, and you've just said, I'm done. Is there? Don't tell me who they are. Just think about that person. And as you think about that person, you can probably list all of the things that they did. And you probably have good justification, just as those spies and the nation of Israel would have good justification for just letting Rahab die. But something else happened. Under the leadership of God, I think, the inspiration of God, we see a picture of this woman, this throwaway woman, being rescued. And it started with what? Well, I suppose we could say it started with the stories she had heard about the strength of Israel's God. But again, in the record, we find other people who had heard those stories and were equally impressed and afraid. No, I think the transformation of Rahab and the transformation of that person that you thought of just a moment ago began with something very much more basic. A choice on the part of these spies to trust her. I want to build that. There is something empowering when I trust you or you trust me. Every one of us becomes more capable when somebody believes in us. And I think that's what's happening with Rahab, at least in part. It starts with the social dimension. The transformation of Rahab from a throwaway person, and nobody's truly throwaway, I hope you understand, but from someone who could be categorized in this context as a throwaway person to a full citizen of Israel and a servant of Almighty God started with somebody trusting her, somebody choosing to reach out and give her another chance. It was the social dimension. And yes, she had heard about this God, and she had not yet had the chance to embrace this God, and that was the next step. She chose to go the next step and throw her lot in with this God who led this nation. That was the next piece. And finally, Rahab joined the mission of a nation, of which God had said to Abraham, the beginning of that nation, through you all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And we find that Rahab becomes an integral part of that family line that culminated in, guess what? The birth of Jesus. Just like Tamar we talked about last week, this woman was grafted in, and God put her in the line of his son, by which he saved the whole world. So what about that person you thought of? That person that has filled up their cup of iniquity as far as you're concerned. That person who's past the point of no return. Would this work with them? Could you reach out to them and say, you know what? I love you. I don't even feel like I love you, but I'm choosing to love you. Could that be a start? Could you grow to the point where you love them in such a way that they could see that this was not something of your human power, but this was divine love coming through? And that perhaps that would draw them into exploring your God. Maybe they already kind of know God or know about God, but they haven't experienced the love of God. They don't know his character. And could this be the avenue through which they understood his character by seeing your love for them? I think it could. And then perhaps they would find their purpose in life, their mission. You know, I think it's true of us corporately as well. Everything for a church to be healthy and happy starts with social, doesn't it? To be connected. I mean, why else do we do this? We can talk to God at home, but we come together because there is something powerful about the social support if it's there. And so we do things, and I hope we do them well, and I hope we continue to do them. We do things like, you know, there's a hike this afternoon. It's a social opportunity. This afternoon, there's a worship outreach at Delaware Plaza to minister to the folks there, just to show them God's love. Let's hope we can do those things and do them well in a way that conveys God's love. The spiritual. You know, I love the fact that this church has a long tradition of telling the story in a basic form, whether it's the Christmas story, the Easter story, or through our sermons and through our class studies, we look at the story of Jesus and what that means. I think that's huge. And then we often deepen that understanding with doctrine. Evangelistic series, vibrant class discussions like we had this morning. Somebody remember that? Yeah. And it's through that social connection and that connection with God that we find our mission, our purpose. You see, so it applies. I think what we see in Rahab's story is very much the solution for that interpersonal relationship, whether it's somebody in your family or at work or wherever it is. And I think it's also the solution for this church and for every church. But you know something? As complex as we can get about a strategic plan, and we can work out our spiritual nurture programs, and we can work out our mission focus and refine that mission statement and have a strategic plan, I want to point out something much more basic this morning that I think is abundantly apparent in Rahab's story. And that is, where does it start? Where did that transformation journey start for Rahab? Was it with the spiritual? I think she had some spiritual inklings, but she was powerless to move anywhere. Was it missional? She just was sitting on that wall and was bought into Israel's mission in the world? I don't think so. I believe in Rahab's story, as in every story that I know about anybody who's ever been transformed, it starts with the social. It starts with the social. To love people in God's name, to give them another chance, that's where God's character is revealed. And that's where that journey begins. Thank you, by the way, Wayne, for amening. I was hoping somebody would. No, I know we're all thinking here. And so as we look at Rahab's story, the New Testament does mention her 3 other times. We won't look up all of those, but we will look up Matthew chapter 1. In James 2:25, it mentions Rahab as an example of somebody who put their faith into action. And it was by her works, her choice to take that step, that it led to the change in her life. And I think that's an important aspect of trust, to actually follow through. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31, it emphasizes the other side of that, and it's faith. Faith. Of course, Hebrews chapter 11 is the faith chapter. But then I just want to let this one sink in, and this is Matthew chapter 1. And it's the genealogy of Jesus. And it says, this is a record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah, the one who came to save the world, a descendant of David and Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. We talked about that last week. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. We saw him a little while ago. Salmon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. You see, in the case of these women of fault in faith, Tamar last week and Rahab this week, God not only chose to salvage these individuals, He not only chose to reach out in their messy situations and give them salvation and a purpose in life, but God also chose to, through them, He didn't have to do it, through them, not just save them, but to save the whole world. God is telling us something by this simple fact. He's telling us that He can use broken people like you and broken people like that person that I asked you to think about that you don't like yet, but you're learning to show His character. He can use you, He can use them to show His character to a broken world and begin that journey for others from that nasty throwaway person, we can put quotes around throwaway, to a full citizen of God's kingdom and someone participating in God's mission of saving this world. That's beautiful. So we were talking about this story yesterday. My wife reminded me about the series The Bible. It was on TV a few years back. And the scene with Rahab there is, I think, captures that social dimension once again. The scene is of her in her house on the city wall, and there's a bustle of family around her. She's trying to attend to a kid who's a little bit upset. There's this tension in the air. She's trying to manage the situation. She's stressed, as she's probably been for some time. And as she listens to the noise outside, a chant begins. It's the people of Israel. And the chant is, Israel, Israel, Israel. And this catches her ear, and her expression starts to change. And pretty soon, weakly, she starts to say, Israel, Israel. And it gets louder and more joyful. And suddenly, in that moment, she belongs. She's no longer marginalized on the city wall. She belongs to a nation that means something. She belongs among a people who know God. There is power in that. And if I could summarize the entirety of why our church here exists and why God has stationed us in this community and the other communities that we live in around this area, I believe God's purpose is to provide a means to be the sort of people through which others can come to belong as citizens of God's kingdom. That's it. That begins by loving them. And their journey begins with trust. Love and trust. Those are the lessons of today. I'd like to invite the praise team to come and lead us again. And as they're coming forward and about to lead us in another song, I just want to invite you to talk with God about this. There's a connection card in your bulletin, and that's a helpful grid for you to look at and maybe check some of those boxes that relate to the message of today. But most importantly, more than just marking a piece of paper, I want to invite you to have a candid conversation with God today. In recognition that, yes, that journey of transformation begins with the social connection, with others being able to see God's love and God's redemptive qualities in us. Maybe today you feel like you've understood God's love, but you've just worked in your own little sphere and you realize you need to step out of that sphere. I want you to encourage you to have that conversation with God and ask Him how. Maybe instead you say to yourself, you know what? I don't think I understand God's love to the extent that I'm ready to share it. And you need the glimpse of who He is so that you can begin to share it more fully. If that's part of it, I want you to encourage you to have that conversation with Him too. Whatever it happens to be that God has convicted you about, I'm going to pray and I'll pause briefly in the prayer, and I just want you to whisper it, at least in your mind, and God will hear you and God will lead you. And frankly, I'm going to do the same. God in heaven, thank you so much for stories like Rahab's. It's quite possible that some of us have felt like throwaways this morning. And this story reminds us that no one's past the point of return who is willing to trust you again. Maybe we've thought of a person that we've kind of pushed aside, and you're inviting us to show them your love, your character again. Maybe we realize that your character and the way that you've expressed it in Rahab's story is something we don't yet understand, and we need to. Or maybe there's something else. Right now, I pause in my prayers so that we can lift up many other prayers to you. Almighty God, teach us to love. Thank you for loving us. In Jesus' name, amen.